good evening to all the excitement happening in Washington, D.C. and America, and bring you all of those live pictures. Let's just tell you about the big story back home, and that was the headline story all this evening, because remember, there has been a standoff between protesting farmers and the central government since the end of November last year. There may be some glimmer of hope for an end to the standoff and some sort of thaw. So it's come about like this, that the government in its latest meeting, which ended today, said it was ready to submit a proposal to the Supreme Court, which would envisage a suspension of the 3 controversial farm laws for a month, for a year or a year and a half, so between 12 to 18 months. Both sides would mutually agree on this if it were to go forward, and the condition for this, of course, is the farmers call off their protests. The farmers have responded by saying they will think it over. They have not outright rejected it so far, and the next meeting takes place tomorrow. This is what Narendra S. Tomar, Union Minister for Agriculture, said after the meeting.
पूर्व में भी और आज भी हमने विस्तार पूर्वक उन्हें कहा कि कानूनों पर विचार करना है और आंदोलन से जुड़े विभिन्न पहलुओं पर विचार करना है, तो निश्चित रूप से समय तो चाहिए, और समय चाहिए तो वो समय 6 महीने का भी हो सकता है, 1 साल का भी हो सकता है, 1.5 साल का भी हो सकता है, और सरकार 1-1.5 साल तक भी कानून के क्रियान्वयन को स्थगित करने के लिए सहमत है। इस दौरान किसान और सरकार के प्रतिनिधि मिलकर समस्याओं का हल खोजें और जो समाधान हो उस समाधान को आगे बढ़ाया जाए। किसान यूनियन ने इसको बहुत गंभीरता से लिया और उन्होंने कहा कि ये प्रस्ताव हम कल अपने यहाँ विचार विमर्श करेंगे और परसों दोपहर में 12 बजे हम लोग दोबारा बैठक में आएंगे और आपको निर्णय से अवगत कराएंगे।
All right, that's the important domestic story that we'll be keeping an eye on. But all the focus and attention this evening is on Washington, D.C., where Joe Biden is all set to become the 46th U.S. president. And this is truly an important one because it also marks the end of the era of Trump and Trumpism, which for not just Americans, but for the rest of the world, and India included, meant quite a bit of uncertainty, unpredictability, and at times bizarre behavior, as well as rule-making, law-making, actions which upset the entire world order, threw world trade into a spin and into a tizzy, and the kind of impact it's had on domestic politics in the United States is a different story altogether. But today we're going to look at what the Biden era really means. Is it just enough to not be Trump? Because right now, that's what Joe Biden, as the next president, has going for him. At 78, he will be one of the oldest U.S. presidents to take charge. And of course, from the Indian perspective, it is quite exciting that his vice president will be Kamala Harris, who is of Indian and African origin. So first woman of color, and of course, first woman of Indian origin as well, sitting in high office. So exciting times all around. You're seeing live pictures coming in from the U.S. Capitol, where the Bidens have arrived, and we will be following that story closely with all of our commentary coming in. So we're hearing today from Ambassador Leela K Ponappa, we're hearing from Ambassador Meera Shankar, we're hearing from Richard Rossow, and from Indrani Bagchi, of course, Diplomatic Editor, Times of India. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for speaking with us on this leg of the program. Ambassador Shankar, let me come to you first. Just to put into perspective how important this is and why, along with the world, we're watching as well. I think that's crucial, because some may question, okay, the next US president is taking over. What's the big deal? Why do you think this is a big deal?
Well, I think America is the most influential country globally. And therefore, whatever happens within America has an impact not just confined to its shores, but actually impacts all countries all over the world. And in the last presidency, we have been subjected to some extent to a lot of unpredictability in policy making and a highly personalized style of policy making, particularly in the trade field. If you take India, for instance, our relationship with America grew strong in the field of security, in the field of intelligence cooperation, in the field of defense cooperation. But there were tensions on the trade and economic side. We've seen the withdrawal of GSP, the removal of developing country status, punitive tariffs on steel and aluminium, and the tightening of the H-1B/L-1 visa process, which our IT companies were using to deliver experts for work in the US, and in fact, a suspension of the H-1B visa program altogether by President Trump towards the end of his tenure. So these have all impacted us quite adversely economically, and we've been coping with it. We've also been having discussions. So it's been a kind of mixed bag. And the hope would be that now that there is a new president who embraces a more traditional form of leadership and decision-making, that the relationship will acquire greater institutional stability, and that there will be less of unilateralism on the economic side and more of discussion and a willingness to look at each other's concerns, perhaps more dispassionately, so that we can find common ground. Clearly, this is a very somber moment for America. Traditionally, the inaugural ceremonies and the inauguration have always been a celebration of democracy, a festival, if you will. There are parties, there are balls, there are umpteen performances, events, and all that has been curtailed because of security in the wake of the assault on the Congress by Trump supporters on January 6th, and coming intelligence that there could still be threats, and also partly because of the COVID pandemic, so that crowds are being restricted or public participation is being restricted. A lot of the performances and so on will be digital and will go live across the country digitally. So it's a very different ceremony. And the fact that, core democratic practices and principles have been, shaken to the core with what happened in the aftermath of the election, I think has made the mood more reflective, but also lent an urgency to President Biden getting off the ground running, because he's got so many challenges ahead of him, the pandemic, rolling out the vaccination, and he wants to vaccinate 100 million people in 100 days to get a grip on it, to revive the economy, to provide assistance to those who've been terribly impacted by loss of jobs or loss of occupations, and to also have an impetus for reviving the economy, not just providing relief, looking beyond that to heal race relations, which have been very fraught in the last several months and over the last year, actually, and also to look at reversing Trump's policies on climate change. So these are the 4 priorities that Biden has laid out for the immediate future, as also the 1.9 trillion stimulus cum relief package that he is going to move in the Congress for early adoption. The other area where you will see a big shift is on the issue of immigration.
I will come back to you, ma'am. Yes. We will go through these one by one. And include everyone in the panel as well. So I request everyone to, stick to one point and then maybe move on so we can cover more ground. It's a big day. Ambassador Ponappa, I wonder if all of these ambitions will be marred by the kind of partisan fight happening in the US right now. For example, the $1.9 trillion stimulus. It's a figure that everyone's watching because then it means a positive impact for emerging markets such as India as well. Will it actually hit hurdles as it passes through Congress, through the process of legislation?
I think the mood in the United States, from what one can gauge, is that they are ready to turn a new leaf. Joe Biden has had long experience in the US Congress, not just as vice president when he chaired the Senate. He was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he's had long innings with the Congress. And very clearly the expectation is that he will work across the aisle to try to rope in both Democrats, of course, and Republicans into the agenda. Trumpism has not gone, and it is likely to be around for a while. So the social cohesion that seemed to have broken down over the past few years, and racism existed long before Trump came along. It just got severely heightened. I think these are going to be some of the focus areas where the domestic agenda, as well as the political agenda of safeguarding democracy, of re-strengthening American institutions. I think for a long time, America and the world really took American democracy for granted. And the shock of what happened on January 6th was really an alert that, yes, over 100 years ago, the US fought a civil war internally. But here, too, you have a political civil war going on, which needs to be really addressed in terms of restoring stability. So it's not going to be easy because, as Mr. Biden has said, he plans to be the president for all Americans. That includes the 74 million who voted for Trump. And he will need to work with Congress. Of course, he has the cards just about stacked in his favor with both the Senate and the House with the Democrats. But there's no question that he will reach out, as I believe just this morning, he attended a service with Republican leaders as well. I think that's going to be his attempt to try to bring everybody together.
One interesting factor is, and I found this very interesting politically for what comes next. Let me go across to Rick Rossow. Rick, I'm sure big day for you. I think all Americans are feeling a lot of emotion one way or the other. It is, I assume, the same for you as well. What do you make of Donald Trump's parting speech? It was quite a dialogue when he said, "We will be back in some form." Is that ominous?
I hate to use the word ominous, because to some extent what he represents, is really representative of what a large percent of the U.S. population wants to see. So, to say ominous, I think kind of feeds the flames of the fact that there's this huge divide. Now, I don't agree with a lot of the steps that President Trump took while in office, but as Ambassador Ponappa said, he did pull in, the second largest vote in U.S. presidential election history. So he may take a pause. He may sit on the sidelines for a while and kind of enjoy a bit of a vacation after what has been a very tumultuous period. But he's got his finger on the pulse of what a large percent of the American population, whether we want to like it or agree with it or not, what they feel in their hearts, that globalization has been dangerous, that foreigners are dangerous, things like this. And so once he begins to find his footing again, and that's not going to be on Twitter or Facebook, luckily, he's going to have to find other platforms to do so. But once he finds his footing again, I think he's going to have a powerful role to play because while the Democrats do have a sizable majority in the House of Representatives, the Senate is razor thin, and the ability to get particularly Republican senators that feel that their voter base is very tied into Trumpism and what that represents, they could put up a lot of very serious obstacles. Now, no matter the obstacles, you oftentimes see a first-term president being able to enact a couple of major reforms. You saw it with President Trump with the tax package that he got passed, President Obama's first year with moving on healthcare and financial services reform. So I suspect, irrespective of what happens with the Senate, President Biden will be able to enact a limited legislative agenda on a couple of big ticket items. And then I think, hopefully on the other end of COVID, we'll begin to see a more normal administration as well, where foreign policy begins to take precedence and things like that. So Trump certainly, I don't think is a spent force. I think maybe you'll see a bit of a pause period, but very soon I think you begin to see him actively working and manipulating with what the right-hand side of the aisle looks and thinks, and how they respond to Biden's agenda.
That's you've put it well, and you have a point there, Rick. There would be some today who find that sentence from Donald Trump ominous. Others would find it heartening that he thinks he will be back or wants to be back in some form or the other. Indrani Bagchi, let me go to you and give us a sense of what we're going to see tonight. Also, you've been seeing these pictures on the screen. We have Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton there on that podium. You will have the Obamas there. It's going to be star-studded. Just the difference, Indrani, from a regular inauguration because of COVID, because of security threats, and how those large crowds that we usually see in a US president inauguration will be missing. What is the kind of timeline we could see before we hear the Biden speech in India time?
I think we can expect a Biden speech within probably an hour and a half. Because you can see people are at the Capitol, etc. But of course, it is an extraordinary time. I mean, just COVID itself means that you cannot possibly have the kind of inauguration spectacle that you had earlier. And I see that both J-Lo and Lady Gaga will be performing, and neither of them, of course, in a normal day, they would have had hundreds of thousands of spectators, but I think it is all online this time. And between security and COVID, it is not surprising the kind of scenes that we are seeing in Washington D.C. today. What is, of course, sort of disappointing, I would say, is the fact that President Trump himself is not there. And it's a tradition in all democratic systems to sort of display the peaceful transfer of power, even if it has been a rancorous one. I think he could have made the effort to stay back for the inauguration. But be that as it may, I think I see that Vice President Pence is there, and I presume some of the leaders of the Republican Party. So yes, it's a different day. It's an important day nevertheless. And I don't think the fact that there are fewer people or that there are COVID restrictions or security restrictions should take away from the importance of the event.
It's very interesting. This particular presidency will be very interesting from the Indian perspective, and this is something that we love to do. We love to see Desis doing great all over the world and appropriate them. And in this case, we have reason to cheer, because it's not just Kamala Harris who will be an Indian origin person in the Biden government at a very high position. There are at least 20 prominent names. And in a sense, it does speak of the coming of age of the Indian American community in the United States and what they represent. So before we continue with the discussion, let's just take you through this quick report we've put together of the prominent faces that you will see in Team Biden-Harris.
Biden's inauguration as the 46th President of the United States will happen amidst heightened security and a politically charged atmosphere like never before. As Biden makes his tryst with history, Indians all over the world will be swelling with pride as a record 21 Indian Americans get appointed to key positions in his administration. While 17 of them will be in the White House, there will be 13 women altogether, making it one of the most diverse teams in recent times. Here's a look at Joe Biden's 21. Kamala Harris will take charge as the Vice President of the United States, Neera Tanden as the Director of White House Office of Management and Budget, Dr. Vivek Murthy as the U.S. Surgeon General, Vanita Gupta as Associate Attorney General, Department of Justice, Uzra Zia, Under Secretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights, Mala Adiga will be Policy Director to First Lady Jill Biden, Garima Verma, Digital Director to First Lady's Office, Sabrina Singh, First Lady's Deputy Press Secretary, and Aisha Shah will be Partnership Manager of White House of Digital Strategy. While Samira Fazili will be Deputy Director of U.S. National Economic Council, Bharat Ramamurthy will be the Deputy Director of the White House National Economic Council, Gautam Raghavan, Deputy Director of Office of Presidential Personnel, Vinay Reddy will be the Director of Speech Writing, Vedant Patel will be Assistant Press Secretary to President, Sonia Agarwal, Senior Advisor Climate Policy and Innovation at the White House, Vidur Sharma, Policy Advisor Testing for the White House COVID-19 Response Team, Tarun Chhabra, Senior Director Tech and National Security, Sumona Guha, Senior Director South Asia National Security Council, Shanti Kalatil, Coordinator Democracy and Human Rights National Security Council, Neha Gupta, Associate Counsel, Office of White House Counsel, Reema Shah, Deputy Associate Counsel, Office of White House Counsel. Even as we take collective pride in the achievement of these Indian Americans, it's important to remember that they are Americans first and their origins come second. But there is no doubt that this is a huge win for India's diaspora and its growing power in the political echelons of countries such as the US and UK. It also shows that the US has come a long way in making people of color politically significant. Chandra Ashrikant, ET Now, Bengaluru.
All right, so the Indian Americans seem to be ruling the roost in a Biden-Harris presidency. It will be exciting to see the rise of this community, but what does it really translate into for us? Ambassador Shankar, let me come to that very basic question once again. What's the big takeaway? Will it be that immigration rules will be softened, and that is something that President-elect Biden may action as soon as today itself?
I think this is one of the first things he plans to do through executive action. He will remove the ban on visas for people, citizens from certain Muslim countries, and he will also look at reuniting children who have been separated from their parents. He also promises to move a bill for immigration reform, and this would provide a path to citizenship for 11 million illegals who are there in the United States. So the whole immigration posture will be different, but I think there will be toughness in terms of border enforcement, as we saw under President Obama. It was not that border enforcement was lax. Indeed, outlays for border control were stepped up during President Obama. So I think an overall softer approach to immigration, but tough border enforcement perhaps will be the order of the day. On H-1B and other visa policies, I think we have to wait and see, because the same constituencies which propelled Trump to power will act as a constraint on President Biden embracing too vigorously a policy of globalization.
You know, a quick question, Ambassador Ponappa. What are the key factors that India needs to look out for? One of the things that was hanging fire, despite all the bonhomie between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, was a solid trade deal. Are there some issues which are sticking points, which are bipartisan issues that won't really change no matter who sits in the White House?
Well, I think that's a good question, and I think that's an important question, because going back to the gallery that you showed us of all the persons of Indian origin who would be in the Biden administration, as you have yourself pointed out, they are Americans, and they will work for America's interests. And obviously the challenge for India, the opportunity, will really be to step up on our diplomacy in trying to expand the common ground, not just in security and defense, but also on trade. I know that when Ambassador Shankar was heading the commerce wing at our embassy in Washington, you had issues also of trade. There have been trade issues under both Republican and Democrat administrations, and these will continue. Rick has also talked about some of the concerns earlier about possible sanctions depending on where India buys some of its military supplies from. So I think these challenges will continue. Trade would definitely be an issue, but I think while many things will change in terms of the larger picture with the Biden administration, everything will not. China will continue to remain an issue of concern. Meera has just pointed out that immigration in some areas will see change and in some areas will not. And likewise, it would be on many other issues, both within the country and outside. There will be attitudes towards terrorism at a time when America is negotiating to leave Afghanistan. You have all of just 2,500 troops left over there. Where is this problem going to be? Will it go away? And if not, how is America going to deal with it? We hear about domestic terrorism in terms of the attack, the swarming, really, of the US Capitol. And we have external terrorism in terms of the forces of extremism in many parts of the world. So none of this can be taken for granted. And I think for India, the trade issue will certainly be important because there have been changes that have taken place in terms of how the Trump administration dealt with it. But the important thing would be that we need to have clarity with regard to where we can accommodate and where we have our vital interests, as we have done, for example, on the Doha round in the WTO and so on. As friends, we will find much common ground together, but there will also be differences. So we should not kid ourselves that, something is going to change 100%. It won't work that way. This administration will have to feel its way through many of these issues. There will be domestic constituencies that also matter. The economic agenda for the Biden administration is going to be great. I think America's whole letting go of its manufacturing capacity is going to possibly see a resurgence. And so, yes, there will be problems, but that does not mean that as friends we cannot discuss it. The important thing is the strategic relationship, the recognition of each other as partners, not as allies, not as anything else, but as partners in terms of stability and security in the Indo-Pacific region. If that bedrock is something that we build on, then we can sustain and help this relationship to grow even stronger. I have to leave now, Tamanna, so I will, I think I've said my piece, and congratulations.
Thank you, Ambassador Ponappa and Ambassador Meera Shankar. Yes, are going to, exit the debate right now, but we have another set of people that we're speaking with. I want to thank both of you for joining us on this big day, but coverage continues here. I want to welcome Michael Kugelman, Deputy Director at the Wilson Center for the Asia Program and Senior Associate for South Asia. Jayant Dasgupta, former Ambassador and former permanent representative to the WTO on the show, as is Manjeet Kripalani, Executive Director of Gateway House. So we look forward to taking this discussion ahead. So much more to talk about, live pictures coming your way, and the Biden speech in a short while from now. I'll take a very short break and come right back. In about an hour from now, the world will hear for the first time from Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. It's a historic day. It's a big moment, of course, for the US, but for the world, and India is watching very closely as well. Well, what's going to be on the next president's agenda? First off is doing something about the COVID-19 crisis that the US has been grappling with. 400,000 people dead so far due to COVID-19. Biden has already said that he will put forth a $1.9 trillion package for COVID-19. One has to see if he manages to push it through Congress and how it helps improve and revive the American economy. Apart from that, he's going to do a set of reversals of decisions that Donald Trump took as US president. One of them is getting America back into the Paris Climate Accord. The other one is reversing the ban that Trump had imposed on Muslim majority countries, which was called the Muslim ban. He's going to stop building the wall. So a lot of the first few days, perhaps, is going to be undoing what happened in the last 4 years. But what next? What happens after that? We're continuing the discussion here on our special show, and our next set of speakers are with us as well. Michael, great to have you on the show. It's a big day. We've been talking about it for a while. Let me ask you first off what you expect to see from this speech. Do you think Joe Biden's biggest priority, more than anything else, will be to find some way to unite people, considering what happened at the Capitol, considering that a lot of people in America did vote for Donald Trump, and that there is a lot of polarization still out there?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always. Indeed, I think that the main focus of Biden's speech will be a call for unity. I think that he's going to essentially invite the country across the political aisle to come together and try to tackle these generational challenges that the country faces on many fronts: the pandemic, the economy, crisis within society, and the climate change issue. Those are the priorities. So it will indeed be a call to unity. I don't imagine that he'll refer all that much to his predecessor. I imagine the focus will be on moving forward, looking ahead. But this administration made it quite clear. It was very transparent when it released a document several days ago that outlined what it's going to do over its first 10 days. And it's going to be all domestic. It's going to be focused on those challenges that I mentioned before. And I think that Joe Biden in his inauguration speech is going to call on the country to move forward and tackle these four incredible challenges, because, of course, it's very unusual for the U.S. to face not one, not two, not three, but four once-in-a-generation challenges happening at the same time.
You know, you were just seeing pictures of Kamala Harris walking in over there with her partner, and that is exciting. That is exciting, I think, for America. It's a very Obama moment when you had the first black president in the White House. Now you have the first woman vice president who is also a woman of color, mixed heritage, and part of that is Indian, which is why all of us are excited over here. And that is going to be a big part of the administration. Also considering that Kamala Harris is expected to have quite a strong role. Let's just take you through this report we put together on how that Kamala Harris factor is being watched all over the world and even in her ancestral village in Tamil Nadu.
This village in the heart of Tamil Nadu will be in focus as Kamala Harris takes oath as the first female, the first African American, and the first Indian American Vice President of the United States. Residents of Tulashendrapuram have erected posters, held special prayers, and celebrated her victory. Wondering why? Well, it's because this village has a special link to Kamala Harris, as this is where her maternal grandfather was born over a century ago. Harris has often credited her civil servant grandfather P.V. Gopalan as a huge influence who shaped her interest in public service and civil rights. 56-year-old Harris was born in Oakland, California, to a Tamilian mother, Shamala Gopalan, and a Jamaican father, Donald Harris. Her mother moved to the US and went on to become a noted cancer researcher and civil rights activist. While she embraced her Indian culture and maintained close ties with her maternal grandparents, Kamala and her sister Maya were raised to be proud African Americans. Her uncle Gopalan Balachandran, however, said Kamala and Maya imbibed a lot of values and habits from their Chennai-born mother.
Kamala and Maya picked up a lot of their values and habits from their mother, who obviously had a lot of Indian heritage. She was a Carnatic singer of exceptional brilliance. She won the President's Gold Medal for Carnatic music. She used to sing in California, and they picked up a lot of values from her.
Ironically, Harris herself hasn't been very vocal about her Indian identity, except in a few interviews where she spoke about how it shaped her culinary preferences. She's been more vocal about the influence her mother had on her.
My mother instilled in my sister Maya and me the values that would chart the course of our lives. She raised us to be proud, strong Black women, and she raised us to know and be proud of our Indian heritage.
It's been a glorious rise for Harris, who graduated in law and began her career in a district attorney's office. She was elected Attorney General of California in 2010 and 2014. She became the first Indian American and the second African American to serve in the US Senate when she was elected in 2016. As Senator, Harris has been critical of India's actions in Kashmir in the past, but this may not be a reflection of her future policies, mainly because Biden is keen to have good ties with India. And as Vice President, she will take her cues from Biden. With her ascendancy to Vice President, Kamala Harris has broken one more glass ceiling. Will it be the POTUS next for VP Harris? Chandra Ashrikant, ET Now, Bengaluru.
All right. So, sentimentality aside, it's not necessary that just because there are a large number or a relatively larger number of Indian Americans that will be in positions of power in the next United States government that is going to benefit India in any significant way. What will probably hold us in good stead is a fact that the US-India relationship has been improving significantly, and that partnership has been getting closer over the last many years consistently over governments on both sides. Will that now really turn into a significant gain for India is the question. Manjeet Kripalani, let me come to you with that question. What are we looking for, and where can we move ahead? Can we hope to conclude a trade deal anytime soon? Can we hope for a rollback in the stop of GPS that was given to us, and those kind of policies which hurt us, trade tariffs and all of those barriers which were put forth by the Trump administration? Or will we sort of have to wait because Biden's attention initially is really going to be on big domestic issues?
Well, Biden's attention is definitely going to be on the big domestic issues, and we have to see how he's going to make that work. If he focuses on foreign policy, then he will have lost his domestic audience, and so he really will have to do that first. On India, I think our relationship just now with the US is totally dependent. The G2G relationship is on defense, and those defense deals are going to go forward no matter what. On the P2P side, which is the private sector to private sector, and B2B side, it's really totally dominated by private business to private business. At the moment, that stands with technology, pharma, etc. These are things we have to deepen. So the pharma sector, for instance, we really have to work hard to let our proven pharmaceutical sector, and we know now from this pandemic that we can do very well. We are part of the V5, the only 5 countries that make the COVID vaccine. And so maybe that will be a game changer, and it will allow our pharma sector to compete more equally in the US and also bring down their cost of healthcare. We can play a tremendous role in that. The other thing we are finding through our research is that the US is also looking to get manufacturing back. It is going to come back, and there's been lots of research and moves in that area. And India is too. We just never really had it. And so there is a new concept. It's called digital manufacturing, where both the countries are going to get a different kind of manufacturing back, not the old sort of smokestack kind of industries, but an upgraded type where the digital part is going to be great. And the Indian software players, the startups, play a very important role. So you're going to see Indian technology, not just in back office and outsourcing, but really in getting into the manufacturing side and really the problem solving side. So I think we're going to see an exciting move in the relationship with the US. About the trade deals, India, we really have to get our own house in order. We're not allowed, as you know, from the farm deals to even trade one state with the other. How are we ever going to get our trade and agriculture trade right? And we have to be part of the agriculture ecosystem and supply chains of the world. So we have to do our own work first. While Joe Biden is focusing on his domestic constituency, we have to work very hard to keep ourselves trade ready for the US in order to really reap the benefits of the new administration.
Right, you were just seeing pictures of all of them walking in to the spot where that inaugural address will be given in just a short while from now. Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden, who will be the First Lady of the United States, also walked in a short while ago. We will be keeping our eyes peeled for that speech, and we'll cut live to it. Of course, you will see it, those pictures right there on the excitement which is going to come about. Jayant Dasgupta, how crucial is this moment? And what really are you going to be watching for? Because to be honest, if you parse very closely at what Mr. Biden has been saying in the run-up to this moment and in the election, etc., all of his focus has been on proving that he is not Donald Trump. But what next? What beyond that? Do we really know enough about his vision to kind of understand what the next 4 years are going to look like for world trade and for the India-US partnership? Mr. Dasgupta? Sir, I believe you're on mute.
I'm sorry. On the trade front, I think the important thing that India would be looking forward to is about disciplining China in terms of subsidies, in terms of the misuse of its public sector enterprises and the unfair advantage that it has been taking through circumvention of various agreements. So that is something which, of course, the Trump administration had also done, but in a heavy-handed manner by taking unilateral action. We expect President Biden to abide by the international treaty obligations that all countries have taken. And in this context, we hope that President Biden will lift the kind of veto that President Trump had used against the appellate body in the WTO and had almost brought it to a standstill, the whole edifice of the WTO. And that the WTO again will come alive and become a negotiating forum, and the rest of the world needs to get together to discipline China, to make it abide by its obligations, to take its share of responsibility as the second largest power in the world. So as far as trade is concerned, that is what we expect from the US to do. On climate change, of course, it has been already mentioned that President Biden will sign one of the first executive orders to put the US back in circulation, in active negotiations, and as a part of the Paris Climate Accord. So that is something which will take place over the next week, perhaps. The point is that he will need the cooperation of China to abide by its commitments and the
torch of democracy to truly appreciate what a blessing and a privilege it is to witness this moment? I think not. 2 weeks ago, when an angry, violent mob staged an insurrection and desecrated this temple of our democracy, it awakened us to our responsibilities as Americans. This is the day when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and does what America always does: goes forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This conveyance of a sacred trust between our leaders and our people takes place in front of this shining Capitol dome for a reason. When Abraham Lincoln gave his first inaugural address in front of this Capitol, the dome was only partially constructed, braced by ropes of steel. He promised he would finish it. He was criticized for spending funds on it during the Civil War. To those critics, he replied, "If the people see the Capitol going on, it is a sign we intend the Union shall go on." And it did, and it will. Generations of Americans gave their lives to preserve our republic in this place. Great legislation to protect civil rights and economic security and lead the world was debated and crafted under this dome. Now it falls on all of us, not just the two leaders we are inaugurating today, to take up the torch of our democracy, not as a weapon of political arson, but as an instrument for good. We pledge today never to take our democracy for granted as we celebrate its remarkable strength. We celebrate its resilience, its grit. We celebrate the ordinary people doing extraordinary things for our nation, the doctors and nurses on the front line of this pandemic, the officers in the Capitol, a new generation never giving up hope for justice. We celebrate a new president, Joe Biden, who vows to restore the soul of America and cross the river of our divides to a higher plane. And we celebrate our first African American, first Asian American, and first woman vice president, Kamala Harris, who stands on the shoulders of so many on this platform who have forged the way to this day. When she takes the oath of office, little girls and boys across the world will know that anything and everything is possible. And in the end, that is America, our democracy, a country of so much good. And today, on these Capitol steps and before this glorious field of flags, we rededicate ourselves to its cause. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce to you the senator who has worked with me and so many others to make this ceremony possible, my friend and the chair of the inaugural committee, Missouri Senator Roy Blunt.
Amy Klobuchar there, kicking off the ceremonies. It's going to be an exciting evening. We're discussing the impact that this moment is going to have on the world and on India from every possible angle. We'll take a very short break, but our coverage continues on the other side.